Sunlight glinting off lazy water, reeds whispering, dragonflies doing whatever dragonflies do, tiny helicopter cosplay, and then, splash. Up rises a crocodile, smooth as a talk show host, smirking like he's got a brand deal, and somehow wearing teeny tiny spectacles that say, "I bill by the hour." He grabs a kid, rude, and declares with all the pomp of a judge reading a sentence, "I'll return the child only if you correctly guess whether I'm going to return the child." Now pause. This is not a normal kidnapper's ransom. This is not, "Bring me a briefcase of unmarked fish." This is a crocodile trying to turn ethics into a game show and logic into a booby trap.
You won't return the child.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the spark that lights the bonfire of logical calamity. Let's walk through why this explodes like a cheap toaster. The Croc's rule makes the action depend on your prediction about that very action. That's not a rule. That's a dog chasing its tail after 3 espressos. If the crocodile returns the kid, then your prediction, "you won't return," is wrong. But the Croc said he'd return the kid only if your prediction is correct, so he shouldn't have returned the kid. But if the Croc doesn't return the kid, your prediction is right. Ding! And he now must return the kid because, well, he promised to obey correct predictions. So the Croc is stuck in a hall of mirrors. Return and be wrong. Don't return and be wrong. It's like a contract that says you must do the thing exactly when you must not do the thing. Legal spaghetti, logical lasagna, culinary chaos. Now I can hear someone in the back muttering, "This is obviously a metaphor for modern email." Yes, it is, but it's also an honest-to-goodness paradox from the grand tradition of self-referential headaches, the liar paradox's scaly cousin, the "I know that you know that I know" fiasco, a fairness rule that eats its own tail, law degree and all. It pretends to be noble. I will be fair as long as you predict my fairness. The problem is that making fairness hinge on a prediction about fairness spins the rule out of control precisely in the moment when it matters. A fairness test is supposed to resolve disputes, not become the dispute. Imagine a smoke detector that triggers when you accurately predict it will trigger. Congratulations. You now have a self-fulfilling prophecy that's both not ringing and absolutely screaming. Let me give you the courtroom version, because nothing says clarity like a crocodile on a witness stand. The judge adjusts their glasses. The jury leans in. The bailiff wonders if eel leather is a conflict of interest.
Your Honor, my client promised to return the child if and only if the parent's prediction is correct. The parent predicted he wouldn't return. If my client does return, the parent's prediction is false, so the promise forbids returning. If my client doesn't return, the prediction is true, so the promise compels returning. We are trapped in a contractual figure eight.
So you're claiming the promise cannot be performed?
Yes, Your Honor. It is a do and don't do at the same time situation.
And the jury nods as one. Paradox accepted lunch at 12. At this point, a reasonable person says, "Okay, but surely there's a version of this that doesn't implode like a souffle during a marching band parade." There is. Some tell the story with a gentler promise. If your prediction is correct, I'll return the child. That's it. No only if, no Ouroboros. Under that simpler promise, if the parent says you won't return, the crocodile's smartest move is to return. Because if he doesn't return, the prediction was correct, which means he now has to return anyway. And if he does return, the prediction was incorrect, but returning isn't forbidden in this version. It just isn't required unless the guess is right. In other words, this isn't so much a paradox as a behavioral nudge with big teeth. The reward structure points the croc toward decency, a moral seatbelt, if you will, except scaly and slightly damp. But the classic version, the dramatic only if you're right one, is the star of our show because it exposes a broader lesson. Rules that grade themselves are asking for trouble. When the condition of compliance depends on the truth of a statement about the compliance itself, you build a fairness pretzel. The statement "you won't return the child" becomes a boomerang. Throw it into the rule and it circles back, smacking the rule in the jaw. The evaluation of the prediction depends on the action, but the action depends on the evaluation of the prediction. Congratulations. You have constructed an argument. Mobius strip. Walk forward long enough and you end up upside down, and also possibly in a philosophy department. Let's talk strategy. If you're the parent and a reptile lawyer has forced you into this ridiculous game, what do? First, of course, shout a lot about lawyers, bow ties, and the Geneva Conventions of kindergarten. Second, if you have any influence over the exact wording of the promise, and I realize negotiation isn't easy mid-kidnap, you push for the gentler if version. It's still weird, but it's performable. Third, if the croc insists on the classic if version, the paradox pretzel, consider declaring the promise void. A rule that simultaneously requires and forbids the same action in a critical case is not a rule you can keep. It's a prop. It's theater. It's the kind of legally stylish nonsense a crocodile says when he wants to look fair while ensuring he can blame logic for whatever he prefers to do. Oh, I wanted to be fair, but the logic wouldn't let me. Very sad. Thoughts and prayers. No, Gerald. Change your rule. There are other escape routes folks propose, all of them less cinematic but more livable. Ban self-referential guesses. The parent must predict something independent of the croc's action, say, the color of the next fish that swims by, or whether tomorrow's weather will involve any clouds shaped like Elon Musk. With independent predictions, the croc can apply the rule without it eating itself. Another option, pivot the guess from action to intention. You intend to return the child. That can still loop depending on your philosophy of intention, but at least it nudges us out of the pure action outcome boomerang. Or we can play with the idea that some statements are neither true nor false, truth-value gaps, or weirdly both, truth-value gluts. If you go the gap route, maybe the rule simply doesn't trigger on the paradox sentence and the croc must pick a different decision criterion, like flipping a coin or, better yet, not kidnapping. If you go the glut route, you need a para-consistent logic that lets you reason without the universe exploding, which is a sentence I enjoy saying more than I enjoy implementing. Now, if you're here for the game theory gossip, and I know you are, this paradox has a tasty angle. Under the if your prediction is correct, I return rule, the parent's best move is to say, you won't return. It's a shrewd attempt to force the croc to give the kid back under threat of breaking his own rule. It's a bit like pushing your opponent into an awkward checkmate where their only non-embarrassing move is to do the honorable thing. Under the paradox version, though, there is no equilibrium. No pair of choices lets the promise remain intact. That's not strategy. That's a bug in the system. You can't play a game whose rules self-immolate exactly at the interesting move. Let's bring this home to everyday life, because you're probably not frequently negotiating with literal crocodiles unless your hobbies are truly unhinged. This paradox warns us about writing rules, ethical, legal, corporate, bureaucratic, that evaluate themselves with self-referential triggers. We will enforce policy exactly when the forecast of our enforcement was accurate, says someone who has never had to explain an audit to a furious board or a 5-year-old. In governance, law, or even personal boundaries, the point of a rule is to guide action when action is contested, not to squirm into non-action because a clever sentence short-circuited your brain. If a rule can be cornered into requiring and forbidding the same act, rewrite the rule. The universe is complicated enough without self-licking fairness lollipops. We should also talk about the vibe, the reptile lawyer energy that makes this paradox memorable. The croc's shtick is performative fairness. I'll be fair, but only under these hyper-specific circumstances that let me call myself fair while actually doing whatever suits me. We've all met this croc. He works in finance. He runs a startup whose mission statement is 10 paragraphs of terminal vagueness. He writes terms of service that could legally marry you to a mop. He is constantly just asking questions that are in fact carefully booby-trapped statements, wearing question marks like fake mustaches. The crocodile's promise is one of those. Theater of fairness, engineered impossibility. A contract designed so that no matter what happens, the croc can say, Alas, logic tied my hands, while deeply enjoying having both hands free and suspiciously sticky. So, what should the parent say in that fateful moment? In the paradox version, "you won't return the child" detonates the loop, exposing the promise as unkeepable. That's useful rhetorically. It shows the judge, the crowd, the river's gossip-prone herons that the crocodile's fairness is counterfeit. In the gentler version, "you won't return the child" is a power move. It leans on the croc's ruling to produce the best outcome. In either case, the line "you won't return" is like a universal key. It either breaks the lock to reveal it was fake, or it opens the door to the actual room where decency is standing. This line is the Swiss Army knife of sentences. Except you don't need to figure out how to fold the corkscrew back in without puncturing your thumb. Now let's sprinkle in some fun texture, because the request was funny and informal. And frankly, if we're going to hang out with a logic problem, we might as well have snacks. Imagine the crocodile with a briefcase labeled Exhibits A through Chomp. His tie is polka-dotted because of course it is. His opening statement contains Latin phrases deployed with the confidence of someone who once skimmed a Wikipedia article at 2 in the morning. He insists that the river is a venue, the reeds are stakeholders, and your child is a movable asset subject to conditional return. He says ipso facto and qua too many times. He uses ergo like salt. He concludes with, "Therefore, in the interests of fairness, I may or may not return the child depending on whether you can correctly anticipate me, which you cannot unless you can, in which case I shan't or shall. Objection sustained."
Just give me back.
And that's the heart of it, really. The paradox is cute in a nerdy way. It gives us a crisp example of how self-reference can boomerang into contradiction. But when you squint, it's also a PSA about crafting rules that can be lived with. Laws, promises, policies, boundaries, they should be actionable. They should survive contact with cleverness. If a contract collapses exactly when the decisive sentence is spoken, it's not a fair contract. It's a trap disguised as a standard. So what do we do with paradoxical crocodiles in the wild? We do 3 things. First, we call out the trick. Your promise is impossible in the key case, which makes it not a promise. Second, we propose a better rule. If the prediction is right, you return the kid. Clear, enforceable, and conveniently child-friendly. Third, we rescue a broader principle for real life. Don't anchor fairness to a prediction about fairness. It sounds sophisticated, but it's just a tidy way to never commit to anything. If your roommate says, "I'll wash the dishes if you can guess whether I'll wash the dishes," you don't clap at the philosophical flourish. You get new roommates or new dishes. Before we paddle away, let me give you a closing mini Mythbuster moment. People sometimes think paradoxes are just word games. They aren't. They are stress tests for the rules we live by. They're like wind tunnels for ideas. Blast them with weird scenarios and see what holds shape. The Crocodile Paradox tells us, a rule that evaluates itself can tie itself in knots. That matters for everything from algorithmic moderation, we enforce this when you predict we will, to corporate compliance, we report exactly the misconduct people correctly forecast will report, to interpersonal promises, I'll be there if you say I will. If your standard is a snake eating its tail, don't be surprised when it devours your Saturday plans. So here's my final verdict, delivered with all the elegance of a judge who secretly keeps snacks under the bench. In the classic crocodile setup, the promise is a logical Ouroboros, a rule that commands and forbids in the same breath when the parent says the magic sentence. That's not fairness, that's a carnival trick. Swap in the gentler promise, if you're right, I return. And the system actually works, nudging the croc toward the good outcome. And the big takeaway, never negotiate with a reptile lawyer whose contract grades itself. Insist on rules that can be kept. Otherwise, you'll spend your life on a riverbank, arguing with a bow-tied lizard about whether reality counts as on the record. If, in some alternate universe, you do end up back in crocodile court, do me a favor. Raise your hand, clear your throat, and say with impeccable confidence, Your Honor, fairness that depends on predicting fairness is not fairness. It's an alibi. Then collect your child, your dignity, and if possible, the crocodile's tie as a souvenir and go home.